We kick off Spock Amok with a visit to Vulcan as seen through the lens of Middle-earth. Spock hits a gong and people shake bells and all the other wedding ceremony stuff, until T'Pring has a shocking discovery about Spock to reveal: his ears are round. So outraged is she that she demands the fight to the death between Spock and Spock. A Vulcan Spock, though. So naturally that one is going to have the advantage in the fight. The creators get into the spirit of this with the old school music playing during the battle. We'll see if the bots let that stay up or not. If it's a blank spot, then you know that they took it away. Haven't had the best luck with them lately. He wakes from the nightmare, confirms that he does in fact have pointy ears, and takes the chance to give us a log entry that they're at Starbase 1 for repair and a little R&R after their whole dust-up with the Gorn. It's also an explanation for that anxiety over T'Pring. She's coming here so that they can spend some time together.
This room they have given us seems very human.
Yep, good quality time to remember why having a few dozen light years between them is good for this relationship. T'Pring is here because of her commitment to rehabilitating people for their crimes by showing them the true path of Vulcan logic, which I guess must involve interior decorating. But she's here to work on them as well, although she understands that Spock has other duties here that he has to see to, namely, a diplomatic mission involving a small nation that's located between the Klingons and the Romulans that would be strategically invaluable for the Federation. The problem...
Your beard is as ridiculous as your proposals. Every word you speak is an insult to Rongovia.
I guess even space has a France. The Rongovians are here, and it'll be Pike's job to negotiate with them and hopefully succeed where the Tellarites failed, although that's already stacking the deck in Pike's favor. What's against it is that they're already here, and insist on meeting the captain right now. They are immediately abrasive, until Pike introduces himself, and then all of a sudden it's nothing but charm. Yeah, I've had many dates like this myself. They're intrigued at the idea of many voices contributing and being listened to, saying that for them, empathy is their hallmark. That and yelling about beards. Everyone starts heading out for their shore leave. Ortegas and Chapel are going to hang out until the latter meets up with her casual hookup. And Dr. Mabenga is going fly fishing, because when you buy a hat like that, you have committed to a lifestyle choice. On the way off the ship, Mabenga lets slip that Una and Laan have a nickname, and Ortegas finally says that that nickname is Where Fun Goes to Die. And speaking of which, Spock has to talk to T'Pring.
A shared acceptance of mutual sacrifice is crucial to a successful relationship.
Yes, that is indisputable.
I am concerned that your time in Starfleet may be causing you to behave in a manner so human.
Ooh, she is pissed that he missed dinner, isn't she? On a similar topic, after the titles, Chapel is hanging with her casual hookup, who insists that he wants to stay and eat instead of running off to make the targ with two backs. In fact, he's wondering where this relationship is going, while she's just in it for the boning. So instead of talking about that, she slips off to go talk to Spock instead. That's how desperate she wants to get out of that conversation. Hey, how's everything with T'Pring? It's not every man who's engaged to someone whose name sounds like a grandfather clock breaking. T'Pring! Meanwhile, Laan explains about the whole Where Fun Goes to Die thing.
As a senior officer, I don't get to be part of the crew anymore.
Oh, no, that's not because you're a senior officer. It's because you terrify people.
It's because she can read their thoughts, isn't it?
I was looking forward to redoing the duty rosters.
I was planning on checking the phaser power supplies in the armory, actually.
I'd crack a joke, but my wife got me the PlayStation VR 2 for my 50th birthday, and some of it is still in the packaging. I'm in a very fragile glass house. There's a security alert, and Laan and Una go to deal with it, only to find a couple members of the crew are putting on spacesuits. While we're left to noodle over that, Spock literally gets smacked upside the head by Chapel for not being home for dinner because he was suddenly drafted into a diplomatic meeting with an easily offended, strategically vital species. That asshole.
You're supposed to put her ahead of your duties.
Yeah, considering that you ran away to this conversation, you seem the least qualified to make that pronouncement. Recently, I picked up where I left off with the show Mad Men, so maybe my barometer is just off, but I find it hard to fault Spock for being unwilling to kick off the tense negotiations with a diplomatic slight, when I'm also watching a man who committed identity theft cheat on his wife. I mean, Spock seems kind of reasonable in my world. He admits that he's worried T'Pring is repulsed by his human elements, so after some back and forth, Spock decides a Vulcan soul sharing with T'Pring is called for. He says to her that it's so he can better understand her. Because guys know that's exactly what you need to say in this situation. Spock's really got the hang of this relationship thing. Well, things have taken a turn for the Freaky Friday as they finish their ritual and wind up in each other's bodies. So as we take the chance to process this situation, April tells Pike that after all the seeming charm, the Rongovians are unhappy and they're terminating the meetings, especially with Pike, which makes no sense because he doesn't even have a beard. They want Spock, which makes it all the more difficult that Spock and T'Pring are arguing over what to do when there's a knock at the door that's likely for Spock. I mean, look at this situation. They have trouble agreeing on answering the door. And it really is the little things that get in the way of a relationship, aren't they? I don't know if we should answer the door. You're suddenly wearing my balls. It takes work. T'Pring finally tells Spock that we have to put hijinks aside and tell Pike the truth. So Spock explains, and after Pike's taken that on board, I mean, really, these are not two that are going to pull your leg on that when there's something actually important happening. Pike explains the problem, and it is a big one. See, the reason why I've been siding with Spock isn't just that it's a diplomatic mission, it's a very important diplomatic mission. This species is their opportunity to be able to cross into the Beta Quadrant without dying. Literally, lives are on the line if they can pull this thing off. And so naturally, T'Pring insists she'll go, since seeing Spock's viewpoint is the purpose of this ritual, and what's the worst that can happen besides death? Meanwhile, La'an and Una are good cop, bad cop with the... I'm not sure what the term is for the situation. They're not arrested or detained, really. F it, whatever this thing is that they're going to do that's likely leading to a spanking. The pair learn that the noobs were playing Enterprise Bingo, going out to sign the Scorch. After digging around, La'an discovers Enterprise Bingo as a list of tasks for the ensigns or lower to attempt to achieve. Once La'an has found a copy of the list, they decide they're going to start doing everything on there to try to understand the crew better, starting by chewing gum during a transport. That's boring even by Boimler standards.
Wait.
That's a little better. Meanwhile, as Spock is working on figuring out how to undo the ritual, one of T'Pring's colleagues calls up about bringing that criminal back into the fold with logic, remember? And she lays a Vulcan guilt trip on Spock when he tries to get out of it. So while Spock goes to see to that, Chaplain Ortegas...
Ooh, I was worried he'd try to get serious again.
What did he do?
He tried to read me some of his poetry.
Oh, sweet heaven.
Doesn't he know you're all about the cock? This discussion about priorities is interrupted by who they assume is T'Pring, and likely being pissed off over the relationship advice that Chapel gave to Spock earlier. But Spock quickly fills her in, and she says, between laughter, that they can work on a medical solution. I mean, I'm sure there's a skull to touch around sickbay somewhere. But Spock needs to handle T'Pring's situation first, she insists. It would build the relationship if he could do that, and how hard can it be to convince a prisoner to give themselves up using nothing but logic? Probably no harder than conducting a successful negotiation with a difficult diplomat.
Is the Rongovian Protectorate aware of the Klingon history of cultural domination?
Response. Merely pointing out the risks of an alliance with the Klingons does not make an adequate argument for the Federation.
This is why C-SPAN is not a for-profit network. Things go bad when T'Pring starts bringing her views into things, that she wants herself, meaning of course Spock, to return to Vulcan and not dilute their Vulcan ways. Pike, knowing the truth of this situation of course, gets up to say he must interrupt to just commend Mr. Spock for the many qualities that he has, and that, quite simply, that makes him a representation of all the best qualities of Starfleet, providing T'Pring with another perspective on her fiancé, allowing her to genuinely see him in a different way. It also impresses the delegate, who says that Pike may speak to them again before they leave. Always nice to have something to look forward to. Well, now it's time for Spock to try to pull off T'Pring's mission, and he brings along Chapel since she was so insistent on this after all. Well, this guy is quite an ass. After insulting Spock, by which I mean T'Pring's fiancé that he is unaware is inside of her body because, well, he's a fucking normal person, and then insulting Chapel, things go from bad to... well, that. So with the criminal captured, it's time for that medical technique, which obviously involves wiping pudding on their foreheads.
Completely normal phenomenon.
So after that works, and why wouldn't it, Spock talks with Chapel and then confesses to T'Pring his fear that she sees him as human and not Vulcan, the way that he was, well, back on Vulcan. Unlike in Starfleet, where he's free to simply be himself and be accepted as himself. She admits that she has been concerned that their marriage is nothing more to Spock than duty, but he insists, no, this is what he actually wants. Although not if the Slashfic writers have their way. Meanwhile, at the final meeting with the delegates...
Why would you turn our enemies into your enemies? We're just a few years clear of the Klingon War. The Romulans are out there biding their time. Who knows what species will piss off next?
2 words for you, Jonathan Archer. April is naturally wondering what the hell went through his crazy-ass head, but Pike says he thinks what the Rondovians have been looking for is someone to do what they've been doing this whole time, looking at things from the other person's point of view. This works, as they fly the Federation flag to show that they have accepted. And La'an and Una head out to assign the Scorch, the oldest part of the hull that hasn't been replaced, and without a spacesuit, just a force field, so that they could do it while breaking the rules. As Spock and T'Pring celebrate sharing bodies by having a sort of an encore of that the old-fashioned way, the end. I really don't have much that I can actually say about this episode that I haven't already. It didn't wow me, but it was overall inoffensive. It was just, taking a break to peek at people during their off hours. A little bit of character insight, a little bit of humor. And I will say I found the aliens to be enjoyable. But yeah, there's not much I can really expound upon. It's a perfectly acceptable episode of Strange New Worlds. Not remarkable, but not bad in any way.